Awesome. Welcome back to the Hornthrowers podcast. I am joined by Grushenka and Ray from the band Dysthymia. Really excited to have you on. It sounds like we have a lot of common ground, sort of politically and musically speaking. And yeah, it's a pleasure. I'm Rob. This is Danny.
Hello.
Yep. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming on. So we first got made aware of you guys like through Sean from Red Nebula. So he basically showed us your stuff. We really liked it. I get kind of a bit of maybe like an Agalok or like early Ulva vibe. Is that like an intentional thing that you guys are going for with it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, from my end, composing like the music and stuff like that, definitely both bands that we both love for sure. Yeah, so I mean, I wouldn't say it was like an intentional thing, at least on my end, but I mean, those influences are sure to just like creep in there. So
Right, definitely. Agalok is one of my favorite bands from the time I was a kid, and it's like impossible not to have like injections in my brain of that influence.
Sweet. I'm guessing that you're pretty excited to hear that they're doing a select number of shows and stuff like that because I never got the chance to see
we
them.
had some early intel about that actually.
Ah, sweet.
yeah, that's very exciting.
Yeah, I'm just hoping that they eventually come to the UK or something so that I can finally kind of cross them off my list of bands who I've adored for years that I've always wanted to see and that always just missed out.
Right. Yeah, I've seen them a few times. I'm older.
I still never have got to see them, so I'm excited.
Sweet. So like usually something that we like kick off like every podcast with is just kind of asking what your intro into like both like kind of extreme music and radical politics was, which I know is a very big question, but you know.
You want to start, Drew?
I was gonna say.
Okay.
Yeah, either or, like who wants to pick up the thread?
Okay, all right. I guess like for like, I mean, I got into heavy metal in general when I was like 13, 14, stuff like that, like with just like my dad's old like Metallica CDs and stuff like that. And kind of like went over to more kind of like extreme stuff, I would say, in like my late teens and stuff like that. When I was a teenager in high school, I was very much into like that kind of like, like late 2000s kind of like metalcore kind of vibe. That was just like the really big thing at that time, like where I lived. So going to lots of like local like hardcore metalcore shows down where I used to live. And then like when I was in college, started getting into black metal. A friend of mine, Rob Broderick, who used to play for a band called I Kill Ya. I met him at a show and he introduced me to Watain. And then from there, I was just like, oh, well, this black metal shit is awesome. And then I ended up getting into the more like atmospheric stuff kind of around when I met Grushenka. Actually, she kind of like showed me a bunch of bands and whatnot that like, and I was like, was really drawn to that kind of more atmospheric and kind of like depressive like vibe of things. And for like radical politics, I guess like it wasn't like really one radicalizing thing that happened to me. It was like kind of slowly, I was like kind of always like, even in high school, like at least like a social democrat kind of thing. And then like as I got older and whatnot, just started reading more, just started getting further and further left. And I mean, if I would say if there was like something that like really radicalized me to like actually start getting involved more directly, it was probably in 2020 in Boston at the we had a very large Black Lives Matter march in Boston at the end of May, which culminated with the cops tear gassing a bunch of people in Boston Common and toppling off the area so no one could get out. And I was at that point, then I was like, okay, like I can listen to like as many podcasts and read books all I want, but I need to like start doing something. And it took me a little bit, but I eventually started organizing with a local info shop here in Boston called the Lucy Parsons Center. Really, really great if you're in Boston and need a radical bookstore or just looking to get involved. It's a great place to come by. But yeah, it's my spiel.
Grushenka?
Yeah, so as far as music, like when I was 16, Ashes Against the Grain came out. So like, you know, that's when I started, I would say like this genre. Before that in middle school, I don't know, like I was really, really eclectic, but like for metal, I'd listen to like In Flames, or like, I don't know, like Dying Fetus. So, but once I found Agalloch, I was like, yep, this is it forever. That's all. Like, this is like where it's at. So yeah, I guess that would be like my starting point getting into there, and then of course I just like went the most natural routes to like Bathory and Ulver or whatever. But politically, I like was kind of like conservative, and then I was a liberal, and then like from college, and then I was into like Stock Dem stuff when Bernie Sanders came around. And then it is kind of the same thing that there was just such a huge shift when Black Lives Matter happened, and like, you know, we were out there, and you're so able to see how scary having the police force that's the third biggest army in the world is. You know, like they have tanks out there. But really, I think ideologically, the thing that changed me around was Black Shirts and Reds by fucking Michael Pirani.
Is that a book? Sorry, I'm not familiar with it.
So Michael Pirani, he is a guy from, well, he lived in Vermont, lived in Brooklyn, New York, professor, kind of like around in the same time as Noam Chomsky.
Okay.
And he just did commentary on basically the way that we just extrapolate kinds of or do we just extract resources from the third world to here, and how all of our military, like every military action or CIA action has been around that end goal.
Okay, I'm gonna add that to my TBR list for sure. Like, because it's interesting that you kind of said like that it was the kind of like SOCDEM Bernie movement that kind of like was pushing you. Because I know that me and Danny had a very similar experience with a politician called Jeremy Corbyn in the UK, who it was like a radical moment where an actual socialist became leader of a socialist party, and then I think. Not trying to speak too much for you, but we kind of had our collective hearts broken by that.
Yeah, and now literally the party's been taken over by a guy who literally said the other day, I don't care if I sound conservative, and he's ousted all of the left-wing members of the party, and it's now a point where people are saying you need to get rid of the Tories, but
what are you
there's the
replacing
things
them
that
with?
they're doing, like privatising the NHS. Members of the Labour shadow cabinet have said they're okay with privatisation, so it's like. And then like there's the Murdoch press, like the Sun and all that. And if they start like being nice to Starmer next year, you know that he's gonna win, because since Tony Blair got in,
Made that
anything the Murdoch
whole,
press has backed has got in the UK.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely similar here between like, you know, the Republicans and Democrats. Like, you know, there's these nominal differences, but like ultimately like since like the Reagan era in the US, they've basically been the same like in terms of economics, foreign policy, all that stuff. It's been the same. They were the same since Clinton, really.
Yeah, it's been the same for us when Tony Blair came in the 90s with that kind of like same neoliberal agenda that the Conservatives had, was just maybe slightly socially more liberal, but you know, still leading a socialist party. So you'd be like, but that's a digression. But like, I was more just saying we kind of had a similar trajectory where we were both reading similar radical books. Like it was like Chomsky was a big entry point for both of us as well. And
I think when we met, we were both into Chomsky as well.
Yeah,
we were more like, we weren't as left wing as we are now. It's got more and more as time's gone on.
Yeah, I think it was like.
I think that's a symptom of the times we live in, though.
For sure, like I think it was more like Chomsky's criticism of like, say, like foreign policy or talking about like Palestine, things like that. We really vibed with. Yeah. But I think we were both. But yeah, we were both very much like SOCDEMs at that point, and I think we both identify now as like black and red anarchists, like syndicalists. That's kind of
Yeah, well, I got the badge. on my
Yeah,
jacket, So
that's kind of our sweet spot at least.
I'm not wearing it, but I got my the Robin patch
Oh
there.
yeah,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
sick. I've got that, and I've got that on the arm of my jacket, and even have like a big sticker of it on the side of my Jackson Kelly that we play in our now defunct atmospheric black metal band.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
I've got one, but then I'm still sewing a back patch on a jacket that I've been doing for a year, so it'll get to it eventually.
Yeah,
But
Michael Perenni is critical of Noam Chomsky. pretty critical.
especially in recent years, there's a lot to be critical of Chomsky for.
Yep, especially in recent weeks.
Oh god, what's he said now?
Oh,
are you not aware?
No,
No.
I haven't seen him pop up on my feed at any point.
The long story short is someone found that he was on a guest list for one of Jeffrey Epstein's things, and he went to a dinner with he went to I guess he went to dinner with Jeffrey Epstein and Woody Allen, and when he was asked about it recently, he was like, "It's no one's business." I'm like, "What the fuck?"
Oh,
That's just
I
oh,
might be getting, I don't want to be slandered. I might be getting a couple details wrong, but that's the gist.
yep.
yeah, well,
well, I heard that Stephen Hawking went to Epstein's Island as well. So
I think so with the Epstein thing. Wow, this is not something I thought would come up.
I know I was breaking news for you guys here, man.
With the Epstein thing though, I know that his big thing was collecting powerful and famous people that maybe necessarily weren't even involved in the nefarious things he was doing, but it was the whole thing of he was that middleman that would have all of these contacts, and then by association with him it would be dirt on them. And I think
So the thing about this is it's kind of when you ask Achilles if they're Nazis, and they're like, well, what does the word Nazi even mean anymore? Is that hey, Noam Chomsky, did you go to Epstein Island? No, that's gross, but instead he was like, none of your business.
Yeah, that's yeah, to borrow a line from Shakespeare, the lady doth protest too much, methinks.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, okay, that's
that
somewhat broken my heart.
Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Well, we are a depressive band. We thought we'd just start off another day.
Well, I'm somewhat of an iconoclast, so it's fine. I don't really go in for hero worship.
Wait, but was that debate where Chomsky and Foucault were debating? Didn't he call Foucault a degenerate and stuff like that? Or he has done, and it's mate, you were at Epstein's Island.
Well,
Foucault was just French.
Well, I think it was more he was super into BDSM and stuff, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Masochism or something. I don't know. Anyway,
maybe it was projection.
This is sort of this podcast does not kink shame in terms of Foucault. Anyway. Oh wow, this is a bizarre trajectory. So,
but wait, does that mean Chomsky was involved in the cameras going off inside Epstein's cell?
Is
that going to get us sued?
Create this conspiracy theory right now.
Yeah.
Anyway, tinfoil hats aside, so I know that you guys are both really heavily involved in various sort of socialist projects within your city. Kind of building those alternative structures, etc. Grushenka with the Socialist Rifle Association, which I think is really cool because I know the liberal stance is to be guns, but if it's only the super reactionaries that are armed, you're going to have problems. And I know yourself, you mentioned that you were involved in an anti-fascist bookstore in Boston, etc. Would you maybe talk about both of those projects and kind of get us back onto a more hopeful trajectory?
Sure. So I started working with a local info shop here last August, so almost a year now. And it's been very, very, very interesting. It's mostly queer and trans operated and whatnot. We do a lot of work just using our store for spaces for other groups to get meetings and stuff like that. We hold readings there and whatnot. We've have organized a couple like marches and stuff like that. We just did a May Day march this past May Day. I'm also been more recently involved with a group down here called the Stonewall Liberation Organization, which is kind of a new group. It's just starting up. It's focusing on like, you know, protecting like queer and trans people and like in these dangerous times and whatnot. Oh.
Oh, awesome. So how did your involvement with the Socialist Rifle Association and kind of getting more on the kind of aiming to kind of like have those spaces for leftists to shoot and be armed, etc., especially in a country like the US where, you know, like, there are just so many firearms that I think that the safest thing is for groups like ourselves maybe to be armed, etc.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the US is that it's like just such a, like, you know, there is so much like culture, like such a, like Kyle Rittenhouse is like a perfect example of like and that's like he's such a worshipped character over here, like a 17-year-old who just killed leftists. Like
Yeah.
you know, and you know, it's extremely common out here for drag story hours for children at libraries to be attacked by the National Socialist Club. It's really common for like people like Nazis to attack like communist bookstores. It's really common for them to go to like hospitals that have any kinds of new introduced rights that like maybe like prioritize like Black healthcare. Like, so there's just like, we got a real active community out here of right wingers. So that's a starting point. And of course, like kind of this greater understanding of like what Marx means, like when he speaks on, you know, the proletarian needing to arm. And then I think the third huge thing to me, like, was reading about the Black Panthers and reading Huey Newton's one of his biographies, just going through like the series of gun rates that were taken away just as a retort to like Black people defending themselves. And we kind of have this re-emergence of that with the queer community. Out here, we have like on Fox News, our right-wing news station, like Tucker
Unfortunately, we're
Carlson.
aware of them.
Yeah, okay. I don't know if you know it, but yeah, he went on and said like there should be like basically like there should be some kind of way around making it so just trans people can't get guns.
Yeah.
So our priority is arming and training like LGBTQ people, women, people of color, any people like that. So we got the Socialist Rifle Association and the Communist Center, or the Comrade Center. So the Comrade Center, like we do an LTC course that's actually informative in kind of a way that other, like, you know, usually they're just teaching you the laws, but you know, they go into that background of the Black Panthers and how like how we got here with our gun laws and how it has been a response to leftists. And, you know, always priority goes to any minority groups who are in danger. The courses are free, where usually they're like $150. We take people out shooting. And then right now we're kind of in the process of building the shooting range in Vermont. We're just kind of starting off with just building up some berms and going from there. And then the SRA does, they have like more of a wide scope. They're nationwide. And so there's one for each state, and they have more just community defense as their idea. So that, like, you know, I did a ham radio course there. It could be anything, right? Like it could be anything that is community defense. That could be distributing like vegetables or something like that, you know. That could be like it's not as like gun focused per se.
Okay,
I wanted to just pick up on the thing about like the drag story hours. It shows how like different it is in the US over here. Because when we've had people protesting the drag story hours, it's like Turning Point UK, but it's the biggest people in that movement is a guy who pretends to be a priest. I'm pretty sure pretends anyway, but he's on like the UK version of like Fox News called GB News, and a guy who's a washed-up actor whose only claim to fame is that he used to be married to someone who was in Doctor Who. So yeah, but and those things they don't even like. They've been protesting like pubs where drag story hours were supposed to be taking place, even though there wasn't anything there. There'd just been a drag story hour there like a month or two ago.
Yeah,
They're really like
there were no drag queens, children, anything they were supposedly
Yeah.
trying to stop present or
it's just weird. And I think like because the UK was known as like Turf Island, wasn't it? And it still is.
Oh.
It's weird to see how when that's been shifted over to America, like America's taken it and they have like fully ran with it and like implemented stuff that this country would only dream of.
well, what is it like? America does everything bigger, right?
Yeah.
Everything's bigger in Texas. Right. Yeah. I mean, there's real danger. Like, it's gay clubs get shot up here, and those story hours, like here in Massachusetts, it's like these guys come in like, with like full masks on. They do look like stupid. We always call them the khaki Nazis because they wear khakis and
Yeah.
like popped collar shirts and
Yeah,
then
like
just like their
khakis
faces
and a
are
polo
covered.
shirt.
But they go in there harassing children. They have a bunch of like they have a bunch of bags going in, and we're all like, what are they gonna do? Like when they get in there, like what do they have? Like and it's such a weird tactical thing too, because there was like 2 drag hours and we showed up to one and they went to another one, like in this like tactical, like they're all, I don't know, like deeply on the internet. And we like SRA, I do interviews, like people like from Patriot Front join, like they try to join, and they leak our information to other Nazis. It's like this, it's really this like very direct confrontation.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like people might think like, like I'm up in Boston, which people maybe like view as like a left-wing city or something like that. But like, I mean, we have Patriot Front guys like marching through Boston like fairly often now, like disturbingly often now. And like Boston as a city might be like maybe a bit more left-wing, but it is like, again, and I think this is the case for most large cities in America, as soon as you leave the city, even like Western Massachusetts, very, very conservative. Yeah.
That's terrifying. Like
Yeah.
kind of the
I
portrait
just
you're painting.
again, this might be a really stupid thing to say, but I find it weird how in this country the neo-Nazis like
They're kind of
bald
just a bit of a
middle-aged
joke,
men that are a
really.
joke. In the US they're like that, but then on the last podcast we were interviewing a guy who's written a book about like black metal and radical politics.
Oh yeah, Tonight, A World That We Bury by Bill Peel.
Yeah, and
Red Politics.
we were talking.
And I'm just
Oh,
giving
sorry,
Bill a little
give him a
plug.
shout.
Red Politics and Black Metal. It's a really good read. Highly recommend.
Yeah, but we were talking about when Posey Parker was in Australia recently, and the neo-Nazis that were there were dressed like surfers. It's like, why do they have their different regional variants? Like, it's really weird. They had like something like long blonde surfer hair, and they were in like board shorts and like, well, they were black shorts and like they had a weird uniform. It's weird.
Yeah, I mean, like it's like look at the Proud Boys, like just like
Yeah.
weird polo shirts and khakis. Like it's just
Yeah, it's always just like, how can we look like boring white guys?
Yeah.
How can we signal that we have the whitest fashion tastes?
well, I think that's probably the thing that they're trying to, and it's something that I remember when it happened, that because they were so like clean cut, that it was actually something that the actual Nazis like kind of like marketed on because of how like they were uniform and presented professionally and things like that, and it was like kind of like the middle and upper classes were kind of won over by the presentability of that, if that makes sense. So I think that they're kind of going for like a similar thing there.
Yeah, like the civility kind of politics. It's very big amongst liberals here.
Yeah.
I was watching a thing recently, well, this morning, by someone on YouTube called Thought Slime. It was about, that, was he called Michael Knowles, the guy who said about at CPAC about eradicating transgenderism, and it was him talking about it afterwards, and he was doing it in a way where he was saying things that about like definitions. Like he said, like trans people aren't like an ontological category or whatever, which like he says things in a way where people will argue with what he said, as in like the way he said it, and not the content, and then they'll look like pedants, like because they're just like,
Well, fascists
oh, well,
don't
this,
care about like
it's a way
the
of like
facts and
skirting
what they're
around the
saying.
argument.
It's
Yeah,
more just like getting those dog whistles out there where like, you know, it's like the philosophy thing, it's Wednesday.
yeah,
If you remember their thing on anti-fascism, like it's the whole thing of like, it's regardless of how poorly educated and like demonstrably wrong what they're saying is, it's not, it doesn't matter, because to their audience and the people they're trying to speak to, it doesn't matter how demonstrably wrong they are. It's just the fact that they're pushing that ideology.
it was the point of
Right.
this. There was literally just that he was using language that you'd argue against the language and not the content, so it made the people arguing against it look like they were just nitpicking.
Well, yeah, it's like the Jordan Peterson thing with the postmodern neo-Marxist thing, where like you know when you try and like, because to our kind of circles, pointing out that that in itself is a contradiction in terms, etc., and stuff like that, we're like, haha, checkmate, or something like that. But like, yeah, it's like, but the people who are already won over by Peterson's arguments don't care about the semantics of that.
Yeah, and just view people like that as like over intellectualizing it, and like the whole thing of like the boring left that would rather talk about like philosophy than like the real world and stuff. And
Well, I don't
Yeah.
even know if they're intellectualizing, like they're sophists. They're as you said, it's semantical, right? Like they're just word salading
Hmm.
stupid shit that sounds smart, but they're
Like I
not
just did.
saying anything.
Yeah, and you still see it here, like liberals falling into that trap of like doing that argument, like and still like famous people, like I still see like clips of like Jon Stewart like owning some like transphobic congressperson or something like that, and it's just like that transphobic congressperson doesn't care that they just got owned like rhetorically by Jon Stewart. They are still passing laws to make it unsafe for trans people to exist. Like,
and
and liberal people just like get to feel good about themselves, I guess.
And Jon Stewart just provided that transphobe with a platform as well.
Exactly, yeah.
Because
100%.
that's what I was saying about them not caring about what they're saying is true, or if they're like proven wrong. It's a
Yeah.
really good video if you watch it that Philosophy Tube did, where they're talking about kind of like how fascists spread their rhetoric and stuff, and it's like kind of like she uses the example of somebody saying like a fascist being like, it's Wednesday, and saying it even on a day where it isn't Wednesday, and then it becomes like almost like a dog whistle where like somebody's like who is in the know about, you know, kind of what they're actually trying to dog whistle to is like, ah, yes, it's Wednesday, you know, and it's a whole thing and it makes sense in context. Sorry, I'm kind of rambling there.
Yeah, I think it's
Right.
not. Oh, it's cool. I think it reminds me of what's the Sartre essay, like anti-Semitism and Jew, talking about how like anti-Semites at the time, like you didn't really matter if you argue their points or anything like that, and like their like logical reasons, like that was not the point. Like, you know, it's like, yeah.
Yeah, they're trying to like hit that kind of like emotional core of bigotry of people who are either out of fear or anger or hatred or whatever, are like feeling those things towards whatever minority group it is in question, and they just want to give that kind of like to be like, you know, peddling on confirmation bias almost, as opposed to like actually like having a rational, not that you can have a rational debate about let's strip away rights and from this group or whatever, but yeah. Back onto like actually talking about the band and stuff.
All right, we do music too.
yeah it's kind of a thing, but we do get into these huge digressions, mainly because it'll either be like Tolkien or politics that we
Don't if you don't want a digression, don't start on Tolkien.
oh, well, I just want to say this. I just finished the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I tried to read Neuromancer because when I was in uni, I did like film studies, and we did about like obviously it inspired The Matrix, didn't it? I read it, and the prose in it was so bad, I couldn't get through it. But then I was like, am I being mean to it? 'Cause I'm comparing it to Tolkien.
Yeah.
But then now I've
Right.
started reading like
The Blade
yeah,
itself.
and I'm gonna read what's it called?
Elric.
Oh yeah, the Elric stuff. That's just I wanted to say that because
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, potentially don't go down this Tolkien. Like, I mean, like, I'm like covered in like Tolkien
Right.
tattoos and stuff. So like,
Yeah.
it's
I
like,
got mine up here, but I can't
It-
show you.
yeah. So, but yeah, like probably that will become a digression later on because who would have thought talking to black metal bands, Tolkien's gonna come up. But um, but yeah, how did the band start? Kind of like, if you kind of give us your origin story, for want of a better word, and we could maybe like get into talking about, you know, sort of the album that dropped in 2021, and then newer stuff, plans for the future, and kind of trying to give a bit more form to the podcast.
Sure. So I started so I met Grushenka when we were playing in another band together. She was doing just clean vocals in that band. And I had started like writing in like 2019, just started writing like this kind of little side thing that ended up being the first song on the Dysthymia record. And during one of our band practices with that other band, Grushenka was doing some backup screams as well live, and I had never heard her scream before. And as soon as I did, I was like, holy shit, that's amazing. And I was like, you need to scream and sing on this thing that I'm writing. And I sent it to her, and she was all about it. Yeah, so that happened. Then the pandemic hit. And over the course of like 2020, I wrote and recorded the record like here in this room on this computer. And Grushenka did all her own vocals. She wrote and I basically just wrote all the music and stuff like that, sent it over to her, and I was like, write whatever vocals you want on this. Like, I have no guidelines, do anything you want.
It was
And
very COVID isolationist, right? Like it's like Ray's in his space writing stuff, sending it to me. I'm in my space, like writing stuff, sending it back, and I think we had done like one song together before COVID, and then the rest of it turned into this like isolation work.
mhm.
How do you think that like affected your writing process? Obviously, writing it during a plague.
Yeah, it was weird because I was still like working full time throughout the entire pandemic. I never got a single day off because of COVID. I was an essential employee. So it was a little bit weird. I would just kind of like come back home and like there'd be nothing to do really. So I would just start like I would write stuff. And it would be kind of like spread out. Like I wouldn't I'm not one of those people who like will sit down and write the whole album in a month or something like that. It's like, okay, I'll write this one song, might take a few days or something like that, record it. And I record as I write, basically, usually just because I need to kind of like write all the parts at the same time and hear them in front of me immediately. So it's very helpful for me to actually just sit down here, record a guitar part, throw some program drums under it quick, just so I can kind of like hear a semi kind of complete version of it. So like I feel like, yeah, just doing that, just being forced to sit in this room by myself and like do everything by myself, it definitely like taught me a lot about recording and stuff like that. I had to learn how to do a lot of stuff. And yeah, so it was interesting. Yeah, it's definitely, I wouldn't say like I was like I mean, I feel like honestly right now I'm just realizing how much the pandemic fucked me up. I feel like a lot of people are kind of like just kind of starting to notice that. So yeah, I'm still kind of like in processing all that, but it was yeah, it was pretty interesting. I enjoyed it a lot, just like just kind of being free to explore and write however I wanted to.
Right. And to piggyback on that, like, so that process of like, we're writing it like back and forth. I'm also working. And for me, like the lyrics are driven by, like, I just kind of go back to this journal I have that I write in like at my worst moments, like at 3 a.m. after like having a horrible nightmare, when I'm processing trauma, grief, whatever. So, originally it was going to whatever the last like instances of that are, and then it was like stuff from the pandemic, and like at the beginning of the pandemic, like this like person that I used to live with when I was a kid got murdered, and then my dad died of COVID. So that ended
Yes.
up being a huge part of what the lyrical content, like it was just so grief driven, but then also as always out there in the protests, and it was just like compounding this grief because everyone there is grieving, and it just felt like everything that's like the politics and grief marrying of this band just seemed implicit to me. I couldn't even see a separation in them.
That's like a really interesting kind of like. First of all, like my condolences for like your loss and everything, but just like that kind of like the marriage between like the pandemic and everything that was going on and all of that kind of drama, and it almost felt like the world was ending from that. And then you had like the George Floyd protests thing, like it just kind of like from both of those things just felt like the world was burning down at that point. But then like, you know, 2 or 3 years on from that, not a lot feels like it's changed, which is kind of like the thing that was getting me through a lot of that was like hoping against hope that that would be a catalyst for change, but it just kind of seems to be more, well, this was a flash in the pan that happened, and now it's just kind of back to the dystopia as normal.
Right. The US really has like, so we've said many times that like we like burned down cities like for years straight and one cop went to jail. Like that's like what we got out of that. And worse, like once Joe Biden went in, everyone just, you know, kind of Lenin would be like just scolding us all right now, being like, oh, what happened? The liberal went in and now no one cares that there's more people being deported, and that the army is way bigger, and that the police is way bigger. And yeah, he nailed it.
You've just put an acceptable face on all of those problems, as opposed to somebody who is like as crass and as gross as Trump was. Like Biden's not like on a policy level, not that dissimilar, and just less brash and coarse about it, maybe.
Right.
Yeah. He literally said like to a bunch of like his donors and stuff like that that nothing will fundamentally change. Like those were his words.
I remember that in the build up to the election, and because like despite not being an American, I followed like a lot of American political streamers because it was during a pandemic and there wasn't a lot to do. And it was just kind of everybody was just in the whole Bernie or bust camp, and then nothing changed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the thing about Bernie, when we were talking about that, is it's just so interesting. You're talking about like Jeremy Corbyn and stuff like that, that like we're just so far right here that like even Bernie was just like this big like, oh my God, that's just so radical. Like, and he's just not. Like
Yeah, he's like the softest social democrat imaginable.
Yeah. And that can feel kind of like, man, this is hopeless. And again, yeah, like a lot didn't change. And you know, I see protests like in other countries, even sometimes where it's just like, wow, it's so wild when like people protest and the government like changes something because they're afraid of their people, and they're like
France.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention the French. Like, I've got I'm not sure whether to call him a friend or not, but an acquaintance that works at the uni who's French, and we went to the pub after an event because I used to work for the uni, and he was like, "Oh, you English, you know, every time you, you know, like if they did half the things here, we would have killed them all or something like that." And I believe it, and it is just insane.
Well, yeah, because they tried to raise the pension age, didn't they? Now they're just setting the police on fire. Whereas over here, we just get like fucked over every single day.
Like, is it like, I mean, I know that there's like issues with Enlightenment thinkers, etc. Because I think it was Ben Franklin. Like, I had massive issues with him, but that quote, you know, when the people fear the government, there is tyranny. When the government for the people, there's liberty. And that's like pertinent to that, at least.
Definitely.
Right. Yeah. We actually, I've been having this conversation about this same thing, like just to bring it back to metal, like that. So out here in Canada, there's like a festival that is called Mes de Morts. And in 2016, they had Graveland and I think it was Fortrice or Peste Noire or something, like some like couple Nazi bands. And Antifa attacked it. And there's just kind of this huge uproar about it, being like, violence is too much. That's a terrible thing. Like, we shouldn't do violence. They went too far. Like, Antifa is literally worse than Graveland. But since then, we've been canceling bands. Like, we've just been like, they can't be on tours because it might get attacked. And that, I think, is a perfect example of how violence works.
And also, it's not like the violence that a lot of these Nazi bands funnel money through to, like their militias and stuff.
Yeah.
It's not like that's
Right.
violence. But this is something I've been saying recently, because we went to a festival recently and Greenlong was saying, like, guillotine. They got the crowd shouting guillotine because obviously it was the day of the coronation. And I was having a conversation with someone. I said, because they were saying, oh, it's, you shouldn't, the violence is wrong. And I'm like, political violence is so weird how people act like political violence isn't a thing. Like, in this country, I don't even know what the number is.
If your legislation starves 100,000
Yeah,
people,
I don't know what the number is now
or-
of people who've
Yeah.
died because of austerity in this country. Yet people act.
pre-pandemic, it was estimated as 130,000
there you
people
go.
died from want of medical services, died of starvation, etc. Just like we're like the 7th biggest economy in the world.
So my thing is the Conservatives and politicians in general can like pass laws that will literally, the end result is people die.
Mhm.
But if you make an offhand joke about something, then you're the bad guy.
Exactly,
Because
and like the state monopoly of violence, etc., like that, like they don't seem to treat the police brutalizing protesters or sort of like acts of war or things like this as the same form of violence as if I was to punch a Nazi for espousing genocide or
like-
rhetoric. It's
Yeah,
like
I think the violence that the state enacts is like whether it be through like the police like directly being violent to people or like through, like you said, austerity, like depriving people of essential services and whatnot, like that violence is seen as like normal violence, or it's not even really seen as violence. It's like, just how things are supposed to work. And then, because people can't really think outside of the kind of context of like living within a state that does have that monopoly on violence. So anything that state does is just not really violence, just that's how it works, kind of. And even like the violence that there is more obfuscated. Like, so like the broad like masses like doesn't really have to see it directly, so they don't have to think about it. So when you have like left-wing groups and radical groups like having to employ certain levels of violence like in order to like enact the change that we're trying to enact, like that is like seen, it's more directly visible, and it's like more directly against the state, which is like seen as this kind of like normality. So
I think that's actually like back to Foucault again. That's one of the things he was talking about maybe how our society hasn't actually become that much more humane. We've just kind of like hidden all of the kind of abuses of power and the kind of forms of violence, etc. Like,
exactly.
you've shifted to the prison system or like legitimate forms of violence and stuff.
Yeah, and that in the US at least, that was the direct reason for shifting like back like into like the more standard prison system that we have. Like usually you would have like more like back like hundreds of years ago, you have more kind of like public punishments and stuff like that you'd want people to see and whatnot. And then they started to realize, oh no, we need to like kind of like hide this a little bit more. So that's yeah.
Yeah, that's I'm not quite certain how we arrived at that.
yeah, back at the politics, but
I think it's inevitable on this podcast that it's going to come up though. Do you guys have any future plans for the band? Like, I know that you're like, I think you mentioned on our preliminary chats on Instagram that you've got like new stuff that'll be coming out this summer.
So we have a split coming out with a band that we're friends with. I don't know like how much details we can give out at this point. We're still waiting. We're still waiting on the other band to finish their side of the split. So hopefully that will be out sometime in the next couple months or something. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know exactly how much we can say about it yet, but yeah.
Cool. We will keep our eyes and ears peeled for that.
Which side of the split are you on, the A side or the B?
It's I don't know.
We were talking about this, like the like whose name goes first.
I suppose like in like the age of streams, does it matter? Like it's really interesting that like splits have kind of become a thing again.
Yeah. Well, we're really in records.
Yeah.
I got a whole lot over there.
Yeah, I've got it's in the hundreds now. The amount of
Yeah.
vinyls I've got, like it's a real problem.
Right. I'm out of space over here. We have shitty IKEA furniture and it just cannot hold anymore.
I think I know the exact one you mean, where it's just like a series of like wooden squares that you sort of,
Yeah.
I have the exact same ones.
Yeah, I find it interesting with splits though, because I did the review for our like website of the
Feminizer,
Feminizer,
yeah.
Bury Them and Keep Quiet split, and I was like, how come there's only 2 songs for Feminizer and 3 for Bury Them and Keep Quiet? And I was like, oh wait, one of these songs is like 10 minutes long.
Yeah,
That's
well,
why.
that's the truth about ours, is that ours is only one 20-minute song and the other
Yeah.
one is like 4 like normal length songs.
Yeah, I just decided one day I wanted to try to write a 20-minute song, and then I did. Like, what the hell am I gonna do with this?
It was our OPEP moment.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, like they're literally like.
Yes.
For some reason, I just thought, imagine doing a split with Bell Witch or something, and like you get like 1 5-minute song, and they've got 2 hours.
And they
Yeah.
are playing, there's like a kind of anti-fascist fest, Northwest Terror Fest, and they have a half an hour set, and we're like, what are they going to play?
Yeah, what song are they playing?
Do they have a half an hour song?
You get a Bell Witch split, and it's like, why is this 4 records?
And then you just get like the last little bit of like
Yeah, it's
the
like-
4th disc.
Exactly.
So we asked you guys to pick 5 songs that kind of like have influenced you, kind of give people a taste of the band, and we'll kind of like sandwich them in between some of your music as well on the radio show. It's kind of what we like to do to kind of like, give people like a little taste of what they can expect and try and like plug you guys to our audience. What were they? And we could go through them track by track if you'd like.
Sure. So I came up with my 5. I think I was designated as the one to come up with the 5 songs. So if Gru, you want to add one or something, feel free. But so the first one I had was Living in the Valley of the Shadow of Death by Panopticon. Panopticon is probably my favorite like band. So in general, like I think just like, yeah, everything Austin does like just hits like that sweet spot for me, particularly which I think this song like kind of showcases that kind of like way he's able to like kind of marry these kind of heavy extreme like moments with these kind of more like not like happy, but like kind of like lighter, like more maybe melancholic, sadder, like brighter kind of passages. And like that's definitely a big inspiration for me, composition wise. I am always trying to like kind of like find that in between area between like light and dark and whatnot, and like kind of just existing in there. Like yeah, I kind of like, I always talk about it kind of a way as this kind of like a like pained beauty almost, or like this aching beauty. What
Yes.
so like that, and in a similar vein, like for a similar reason, the next song I have is White Granite by semi-local boys, Falls of Raros.
Oh yeah.
Really great band from up in Maine. We know those guys, they're really awesome. Killer fucking song, killer record. Same kind of thing where they're able to kind of achieve that like both light and dark at the same time kind of sound that I really like.
It's like really like a powerful thing, like with both Panopticon and Falls of Rauros. Like almost when they go into major keys, it provides like that juxtaposition and all that kind of like, I think melancholic beauty is like a really good way of describing it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's a lot of relief points in our music, right? It's not just like we're not doing the like necessarily like the DSBM like sit in like the worst feeling the whole time kind of thing.
Yes,
Yeah.
like
Well,
one way I was like looking into that, like it's like looking not even necessarily major scales, but looking at modes like Dorian and Locrian and things like that. like old like church scales and stuff like that. It's a way of communicating that emotion, and it's been something that I've noticed bands like that doing. It's fun.
Yeah. Well, speaking of sitting in all of the bad emotions and not feeling anything happy, the next one I have is A World Dead and Gray by a band called None. They're a band. Yeah,
Sorry, my favorite DSBM band. Like,
I was about to say, they're just the best DSBM.
We went to Oregon and they're like not revealed who they are. And so we were going from bar to bar and we were like, who is None? Who is None?
is that them? No, yeah, like the Damp Chill of Life is probably my favorite DSBM album ever.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, they're just the best DSBM band out there right now. That's not a debate. That's just facts. I will
we might
not,
as well quit.
Yeah, I don't know what we're doing here, to be honest. Like, why try? But yeah, just like that. Just if you're looking for that kind of like oppressive sadness, no relief kind of stuff, they're the band to go with. They're fucking awesome, and like yeah, they just have that their production is just perfect for me. Like that they've nailed that kind of like hi-fi lo-fi kind of sound. Okay, the next thing I have out here was Queen of Borrowed Light by Wolves in the Throne Room. I feel like, any band that plays music like we do, like listens to Wolves in the Throne Room, or was
right. We're deeply influenced, especially like vocally. I'm very I think I take a lot from them, and that whole like scene out there, right? Like that's where like Agalloch came out of that side, and like bands like Velvet Cocoon.
So that's actually something that, thank you for reminding me. It was like a question that I was going to ask, because I haven't released it yet due to some technical issues, but like we were speaking to Jake from Visigoth, who also did like Caladan Brood and stuff like that.
Gallobraid.
Yeah, bring back Gallobraid, Jake.
Yeah, bring it back.
Such a I'll talk to you about that like after we're not recording, because I don't know how much he's happy with me saying. So but
I just want to say he's a sweetie pie.
Oh,
like
he's
he called
lovely.
We met him at the festival we went to, and he called everyone sweetie pies. And he was very nice. And I didn't realize because he tried my Pepsi Max. You guys don't have Pepsi Max over there, and he was like, it's like Pepsi with loads of like aspartame and stuff like that in it. It's like the best. And he tried it, and he's like, "Oh my god, this is the best!" And he got it with his like, what was he? I don't know. Whiskey. I don't remember what it was he had, but.
Yeah, we ended up like going to like the after party after this festival and like having like a messy night out until like 5:30 in the
wasn't
morning.
Pepsi.
You didn't drink.
I don't drink. But yeah, that's why I was drinking Pepsi.
I can assure you it was messy for me in the morning. But the thing that we were talking to him about when we were talking about black metal was how the Pacific Northwest, that style of US atmospheric black metal, has its own sound. And how almost it was something that I just kind of said in the moment, but like I've been like kind of like ruminating on a little bit, how in some sense black metal is almost folk music in the way that it takes a lot from the region it's from, and you can tell when you're listening to a Norwegian black metal band versus like Agalloch or Panopticon. I'm just wondering for you, like how much of that is like a kind of like a present thing that you're noticing when you're creating these things.
It's interesting because there's not a concept within, like, I think we're not really like, the East Coast is not thought of as like black metal predominant. We have Falls of Eros, of course, we have Obsidian Tongue, but it's like, it's just really rare. And I was actually talking to some people in Denver about this because they have a whole scene with like Blood Incantation and like Dreadnought and all these like intertwined people that it's like they start influencing each other because they're just working together. They're kind of sharing members and stuff like that. What's bizarre out here is like there's such a lack of a black metal scene. Like in the West Coast, I could see that, all those people were kind of piggybacking off of each other in certain ways, playing together, influenced by each other. And we don't have that community here.
Okay, that's interesting. So that kind of might be why that is a more not uniform sound as in they all sound the same, but you can kind of get that. And I suppose like having a community in which shares influences, people have played in different bands with each other, it kind of informs the general vibe of that scene, I suppose. That's interesting. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah. Sorry, what were
Yeah.
the rest of your picks? Sorry, it was like it just jogged my memory that it was a question I wanted to bring up.
Yep.
No, that's cool.
But yeah.
Yeah, so real quick though, I chose Queen of Borrowed Light for Wolzenthurm specifically because there is a song on the Dysthymia album that is like very, very like specifically influenced by that song. Bonus points if you can guess which one it is.
I was literally about to go, is it Nothing
Yeah.
Grows From You?
Yeah, it was.
Yes.
It's,
It's my favorite one of the album as well. So.
Yeah, I just love that kind of like intro kind of vibe, like where it's just the single tremolo guitar and stuff like that, creating that huge wall of fuzz and whatnot. I was like, I want to do something like that.
Right.
And
I
like
had
giving way
mentioned-
later to the more melodic guitar bits like later in the track. Yeah, it's my favorite track that you've done. So
I'd mentioned to Ray maybe adding this, but I just ended up kind of taking off. But like my vocals are so influenced by Weakling, which is like also from that exact same like, and it's that genre, like the West, like the kind of like the early like West Coast black metal scene.
Yeah, and so the last song that I have is a song called "A Dream to End Too Soon" by a band called Autumn Leaves Scars. This is a band that Grushenka actually showed me a couple of years ago. I think they only have, I think they have a few albums, but only one is on Spotify, and that's like the only one I really know. I think right now they have a vocalist, but for this album, it's all instrumental, which is really cool. It's like instrumental DSBM kind of, very cool, just riffs and melodies, and like it's very just kind of like flowing and like really nods you off and stuff like that. You can really like fall into it. Really,
It's
really
like autumn leaves, like falling leaves, like like
Yeah, it's
LEA, like autumn leaves,
it's like
comma leaves, comma
I
stars.
like the wordplay, yeah.
I love DSBM names like Make a Change, Kill Yourself. Like I just that I love the stupid like dumb names they come up with.
Yeah,
it's
no,
so
like
good.
absolutely. And I think just battle generally just it's a bit goofy, right?
Yes.
But no, like I know what you were kind of like alluding to when you were talking about like that sound of it and how you like nod off and stuff. I don't know how much this says about me as a person. I used to fall to sleep to that Nun album.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think like the Damp Chill of Life. It was just like I found it very comforting.
it's super relaxing, honestly. It's like nodding off at that part where like the guy is like screaming about like killing someone or something like that. Just like,
yeah.
ah.
It was like, you know,
I've lately been like skipping limbs and going straight to Falling Snow and just falling asleep to that. And then wake up and then something God knows is playing on my phone and I'm like, oh, it's like 3
yeah, just some
a.m.
like war metal or
Yeah.
something like that. Like,
I get worried though when that happens and it goes on shuffle because I've woken up sometimes like Marduk's playing in my ears. I'm like, what if like there's some like weird NSBM playing in my ears while I'm asleep?
Yeah.
It's like
I-
poisoning my brain.
I don't
Yeah.
want to talk. I don't want to talk about Marduk. I was recently having to prove to a very good friend of mine that Marduk were not, like unabashed Nazis, and then
No,
they were,
no one needs to talk about Marduk anymore. We've grown past the need for
Yeah.
Marduk.
and they were like, "Oh, well, they said in this one interview that they're not Nazis," and I'm like, "Oh yeah, it's almost like being a Nazi isn't marketable." Like,
No,
Thankfully.
we're not Nazis. Anyway, here's our new album, like Werewolf Führer Storm or some shit.
Werewolf, Führer, blonde hair, blue eye, killing
Yeah.
machine, something. I don't know.
Vladislav the Jew Slayer.
Yeah, right. No.
Yikes. So that was, unless my maths are completely off, that was 5 picks.
That's fine. Yeah, we're good.
Grushenka, are there any things you'd like to add and have us blast on the radio?
Yeah, so I think that was my challenge, is that I don't like to have a song is so like, again, I take such influence, and I was saying Weakling, and I just like don't, to give a single song would be like, I listen to albums so much, like as a concept. This is why I'm into records. And so I really could only come up with like things like Weakling or Sabrosa, like just like you know, full albums that are like, I'm hearing something and like, oh, I want to do that.
Yeah, I find that like a huge difficulty just in like when I'm like listening to new stuff or trying to find stuff I want to play on the show, I put an album on and then it'll be like I have to make a conscious effort of when there's a specific moment that grabs my attention. I'm like, right, bookmark it now. Like
That's why
Yeah,
I'd
no,
fail
this
like
is, like-
the I'd fail the thing where they ask you to name 3 songs because like I love Opeth, right? One of my favorite bands. I can't name some songs sometimes. I can sing them to you, but I can't name them because I've just listened to the album so many times. And it's just come on, and it's
Yeah.
like
I think it's just acceptable to just be like people enjoy things in different ways, and some
Yeah.
people
Sure.
I mean, the
enjoy the
process of
whole.
me picking these songs was like just going through the album and playing a little bit because I was like, I know what the song sounds like, but I don't know what it's called because I need to say, I just like put on the album and like then don't pay attention to what song's playing.
Well,
Yeah.
I used to have like the super like encyclopedic knowledge of like, you know, my favorite bands. I could tell you like, you know, I could tell you like the order release, year of release, and everything for like, you know, when I was like a 12 or 13 years old, like for Iron Maiden, even tell you which producer produced the album, like this super like encyclopedic knowledge. And just as I've gotten older, it's just kind of like
Yep.
I'm honestly lucky if I can remember like the band name for like something I've been listening to on repeat for weeks.
Right.
Exactly.
So there's this band, and I don't know how to pronounce it. It's like Koldovsto. And like when we sent out our record to the guy who was mixing and mastering it, we were like, make it sound like Koldovsto. Like now I could say like you should put on one of those, but it's like the songs are called like 1, 2, 3.
Oh, like a
4,
Batushka kind of
5.
thing. Almost.
Yeah. So if you want to put on one, that would give you an idea of what we were doing in our like production. Yeah.
I almost put Gold Up Still on here. Like,
Yeah. One.
We could, if you'd like, we could do our own like sort of like listen through of an album, and if you recommend an album, we'll do the legwork and like find a
That's-
track to play.
Yeah, I don't.
It only has one album, so that's
It's-
easy.
Oh,
And so
okay.
it's
called Nizaria Niboga. No, it's no gods, no kings in Russian.
If you could send me like a link to it, maybe like in the
Yeah.
chat, just so I
I'll
can.
send you the list of these songs, and I'll send you the links to those 2 albums.
Oh,
Yeah.
be
that would make it
amazing.
better because sometimes like when we're trying to find, we have to go through here, like through the podcast and like write it down.
Especially when it's like a band name that's in like the Cyrillic alphabet or something
Yeah.
like that. And
This
it's
is
just-
another one that no one knows who they are.
Yeah, like the amount
Yeah,
of times,
theories.
the amount of times just for like a bit of trivia, I've had to ask my friend who like listens to like every episode we put out, and thankfully can translate Russian for me. And like,
Yeah.
what does that mean? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Like, I'll put that in as a little bit of trivia when I introduce the song.
And you'll get like voice notes with like the pronunciation
Oh yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
as well.
Like Elliot, shout out! You are like a lifesaver when it comes to like Eastern European black metal.
Mhm.
So like now that we've like kind of like had the picks and like nerded out about stuff, kind of a note to like end the show on that we like to talk to guests, especially ones that are politically active, you know, kind of either in like direct action, electoral politics, anything. We live in an incredibly and increasingly bleak world. What is it that actually gives you some semblance of hope in that?
You're listening to DSBM band about hope.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
going to say.
It's
I'll say though,
Yeah.
but in all seriousness though, I would say the work that I've been doing with the Lucy Parsons Center, just seeing the amount of like kind of like younger Gen Z people who are really interested in activism, interested in leftism, aren't afraid to go into a store and be like, I want to read Marx or Kropotkin or something, or like Malatesta and stuff like that. Just seeing how active they are and how engaged like younger people actually are with this stuff, and working with them, and actually just like I think doing any sort of activism kind of gives you some hope, because it's like, you know, you're doing the literal things that are to make the world better. So yeah, that's my guy.
You know, I have had this strange experience where I like working within the leftist community has not given me any hope. And I actually had this thought about like, so when I was speaking on this book, Revolutionary Suicide by Huey Newton, and like, you know, he has this point where he says he goes into the colleges and he sees nothing there, and he goes to Ashbury Height and he sees nothing there. So then he just like straps in some wine and invites out brothers from the street and plays cards and steals everyone's money and talks. And in those moments, he was like, that's why the Black Panthers exist. And for me, it is a little hard because I do end up in these spaces sometimes seeing a lot of, I don't know, like dynamics, like especially as a woman, like I've had a lot of bigotry against me in those spaces. And I think the US is so individualistic, and just breaking out of individualistic tendencies into just general collectivist tendencies, like moments where like my neighbors are like shoveling out my car, you know, and like I can only see it in these like micro experiences of like, if you could just understand others and kind of foster this collectivism instead of this like fear of everyone being ready to stab you in the back, I think that creates like a wider net, in my opinion.
Yeah, like I think like it reminds me of something like David Graeber talked about, where he was just like, I think he wrote about it in Debt, his book Debt, where he was talking about how like everyone is a communist most of the time, like most throughout their day-to-day lives. Like if you're just like working with someone on something and they ask you to like pass them a hammer, you're not going to be like, well, what do I get if you pass you that hammer? Or if like, you know, you're outside shoveling snow or something like that, and like you see someone needs help, you just do it. And most people don't think about that, they just do those kind of things. So yeah, I think those, that's
almost like capitalism forces us to act contrary to our nature.
It's weird, right? Yeah.
But no, that's a really good book. I loved Graeber and was really sad a couple of years ago when he passed.
Yep.
I got it right over here.
Yeah. Oh, you got a hardcover, fancy.
I found this like the other day actually for like $12, and I was like, I have to get it. It's like,
yeah, I had to get like the paperback in like print to order or something, because it was super hard to come by.
I've only seen the paperback. I mean, we've had it at that bookstore I've been volunteering at, and like we've only gotten it in paperback before. So I was like, oh, hardcover? Hell yeah.
I've got a hardcover of the book that he wrote posthumously with another anthropologist, The History of Everything.
I made it like halfway through that. I need to get back to that. It's a tome.
Yeah, I've only read like maybe the first 3 chapters, but I really liked what he was talking about like breaking free from the dichotomy of the Rousseau kind of, you know, is like, was it Rousseau versus Hobbes, where it's like one is that, you know, one is that basically that we're a species in decline, one is that we're like a species in ascension.
Like the Leviathan versus like
the discourse on inequality
versus like the what is it, the noble savage or something like that, like,
yeah, and
not a proper term these days, you know.
Yeah, I think like Hobbes's whole thing was like, you know, that we're evil and need to be restrained, whereas like Rousseau, I'm not sure if I'm probably mispronouncing his name, but like his whole thing was that we're actually becoming more civilized over time, etc. And then Graeber's like, well, actually the anthropology doesn't bear out either argument. So
yeah.
But yeah, I'm really excited to.
Turns out, people are complicated.
Yeah, exactly, and
history. Turns out you just can't reduce things to most any binaries, really.
That's why we have dialectical materialism, Sweaty.
Yeah, nuance, baby. Yeah, thank you very much for coming on. Obviously, this is usually the point where we ask if there's anything you want to plug, but as you can't tell us too much about the split that's coming out or anything, if there is anything you want to kind of dangle in front of potential fans?
I'll just shout out some other organizations here in Boston if anyone is in that area and wants to get involved or needs help in any way. So obviously, Lucy Parsons Center, Stonewall Liberation Organization, Warm Up Boston, it's a mutual aid group here in Boston, Mass Struggle, which helps with like unionizing efforts here in Boston. the Muslim Justice League. I'm forgetting a bunch. There's so many. Yes, yeah. That's just those are some. Go. Yeah.
Yeah, you know. I
Yeah.
don't know if I'd shut out any orgs.
John Brown Gun Club. John Brown Gun Club too.
Yeah, they're good.
Yeah.
Smoldering is brave. Yeah, no, thank you very much.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us on here. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.